You're standing in the throne room of a medieval castle, and the smell hits you before anything else. A nauseating combination of rotting flesh, human waste, and something sweet that makes your stomach turn even harder. The king sits before you, covered head to toe in what looks like a thick, glistening paste, and you realize with horror that it's not mud. It's excrement. Human excrement, mixed with honey, and he's smiling. Because in his mind, this disgusting ritual isn't madness, it's medicine. It's salvation. It is the only thing standing between him and the leprosy that has already begun to eat away at his fingers. Welcome to the world of medieval fecal therapy, where European royalty quite literally bathed in human waste because some charlatan physician convinced them that the humors in fresh dung could cure everything from plague to infertility. And the truly disturbing part? This wasn't some fringe practice whispered about in dark corners. This was mainstream medicine for the elite. Kings paid fortunes for the privilege of being slathered in sewage. Queens lined up for fecal face masks. And physicians who perfected the recipe, the exact ratio of human excrement to animal fat to herbs, became wealthy beyond imagination. But here's what makes this story genuinely horrifying. The practice didn't just exist in isolation. It was part of a larger medieval belief system about the body that led to some of the most disgusting, bizarre, and medically catastrophic practices in human history. And these weren't ignorant peasants doing this. These were the most educated, powerful, wealthy people in Europe. The people who ran kingdoms and commanded armies. The people who shaped the course of Western civilization. And they were rubbing literal human waste into open wounds. Let me take you back to 13th century France, to the court of King Louis IX, later known as St. Louis. Now, Louis had a reputation as a pious, just ruler. He built Sainte-Chapelle, led 2 crusades, and was eventually canonized by the Catholic Church. A saint, a holy man. And this holy man had a personal physician named Henry de Mondeville, who kept detailed records of the king's as medical treatments. Records that survived in monastery archives and make for absolutely nightmare-inducing reading. Because King Louis, this saintly ruler, suffered from chronic skin conditions, probably psoriasis or eczema, though medieval doctors had no understanding of either. And Henry de Mondeville's solution was something he called the royal poultice. The mixture had to be applied warm, not hot enough to burn, but warm enough that the healing essences could penetrate the skin. They de-wrap him in linen, soaked in wine, because apparently adding alcohol to human waste made it medicinal, and leave him like that for hours. Sometimes overnight. The smell was so overpowering that servants would vomit. The king's bedchamber had to be fumigated with burning frankincense constantly, just to make it bearable for anyone to enter. And here's the thing that'll make your skin crawl. It worked. Or at least, Louis thought it worked. His skin conditions would temporarily improve, probably because the moisture from the poultice provided some relief, or maybe just because of the placebo effect. But Louis credited the fecal treatments with saving his life. He became so convinced of their efficacy that he mandated all his courtiers undergo similar treatments as a form of preventive medicine. Imagine being a noble at the French court, dressing in your finest silks and jewels, attending state banquets and diplomatic functions, and knowing that underneath those expensive clothes, your skin is still sticky with dried human excrement from your mandatory medical treatment that morning. But Louis wasn't an outlier. Across medieval Europe, fecal therapy was considered cutting-edge medicine. The theoretical basis came from ancient Greek humoral theory, the idea that the body contained 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Disease occurred when these humors became imbalanced. And somehow, medieval physicians convinced themselves that human waste contained powerful rebalancing properties. They called it the Great Equalizer. One particularly disturbing text from the 14th century, written by a physician named John of Gaddesden, who served the English royal family, describes something called the fecal facial. Wealthy noblewomen obsessed with maintaining youthful skin would pay enormous sums for this treatment. The physician would collect fresh human feces again, preferably from healthy young donors, and mix it with egg whites, powdered pearls, and lavender oil. This mixture would be applied to the woman's face and left to dry into a hardened mask. The woman would wear this literal shit mask for an entire day, going about her normal activities in the castle, receiving visitors, even dining with family. The smell must have been indescribable. When the mask was finally removed, the skin underneath would be red, irritated, and often infected. But the temporary tightness from the dried mixture convinced women their wrinkles were disappearing. Some noble women underwent this treatment weekly for years. The long-term effects were catastrophic chronic skin infections, scarring, and probably countless bacterial diseases we can only guess at. But they kept doing it because the alternative, looking old, being seen as less desirable, was worse than covering your face in human waste. Now, you might be thinking this was just topical application. Gross, but not immediately life-threatening. But oh, it gets so much worse. Because medieval physicians also prescribed oral consumption of human and animal feces for internal ailments. A medical text from 1315, preserved in the British Library, describes treatment for stomach complaints that involved grinding dried human feces into a powder, mixing it with wine, and having the patient drink it, multiple cups per day, for weeks. The text cheerfully notes that patients often vomited violently after the first few doses, but insists this is actually good. It means the medicine is purging the corrupted. Humors. What was actually happening was the patient's body desperately trying to expel the dangerous bacteria they were ingesting. Some patients died from these treatments. Their deaths recorded in monastery ledgers with clinical detachment expired on the 5th day of treatment. Humors proved too corrupted for even the strongest purgative. They literally killed people with medicinal sewage and then blamed the patient's body for being too sick to handle the cure. The most disturbing part? These practices persisted for centuries. Well into the Renaissance, when we like to think of Europe as becoming more enlightened and scientific, physicians were still prescribing fecal remedies. Queen Elizabeth I of England, in the late 16th century, had a personal physician who prepared something called the Royal Tonic, a mixture that included powdered human feces among its ingredients. Elizabeth, one of the most intelligent and well-educated monarchs in European history, drank this concoction regularly because her doctors convinced her it would prevent the smallpox that had scarred her earlier in life. But the fecal obsession went beyond medicine. It infected pun absolutely intended the entire medieval understanding of the body and its functions. Nobles believed that the quality of your excrement revealed your social status. There are documented cases of royal physicians examining the king's feces daily, looking for signs of noble character in the consistency and color. They kept detailed logs. Some of these logs survived. There is a record from the court of Charles VI of France, where the royal physician notes with concern that the king's feces were too dark, indicating an excess of melancholic humor, and prescribing, I kid you not, that the king should consume lighter-colored feces from a young child to restore balance. They actually implemented this treatment. The King of France ate a child's excrement mixed into his food for 3 weeks. The practice of fecal transplantation, which modern medicine has actually revived in a very different, very sterile form for treating certain intestinal infections, was happening in medieval castles, but with none of the safeguards, none of the understanding of bacteria, none of the sterilization. They were just moving waste from one person's body into another's and hoping for the best. The mortality rate was staggering. Here's where it gets even more twisted. Medieval Europeans didn't just use human feces. They had elaborate hierarchies of animal waste based on which animal was considered most noble. Lion feces were prized above all others, extremely rare, extremely expensive, supposedly containing the essence of courage. Royal menageries kept lions not primarily for entertainment, but as sources of medicinal dough. Keepers would collect every dropping, dry it carefully, grind it to powder, and sell it for prices that would make modern pharmaceuticals look cheap. A single ounce of powdered lion feces could cost more than a peasant family's annual income. And what did wealthy nobles do with this precious substance? They mixed it with wine and drank it before battles or important negotiations, believing it would give them lion-like bravery. Some would rub it on their weapons. Knights would eat small amounts before tournaments. There are accounts of noblemen dying from infections after consuming lion feces, their deaths attributed to the lion's strength being too great for mortal bodies to contain. They literally died from eating lion shit and convinced themselves it was because they weren't brave enough to handle the power. Below lion feces in the hierarchy came eagle droppings for vision problems, bear waste for strength, and horse dung for virility. Infertile noblewomen would consume horse feces mixed with honey because apparently adding honey to excrement made it more palatable in hopes of conceiving. There are medieval medical texts that specify exactly how much horse dung a woman should eat per day to maximize fertility. The recommended dose would make you vomit just reading about it. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of medieval fecal practices was how they intersected with religious belief. Some monks practiced what they called holy humility treatments, deliberately consuming their own feces as an act of penance and self-mortification. They believed that by doing something so disgusting, so degrading, they were cleansing their souls of pride. Monastery records describe monks who would fast for days, then break their fast by eating their own dried excrement mixed with bread. They do this in front of other monks as a demonstration of their devotion to God. Some monks died from these practices, their deaths celebrated as martyrdom holy men who'd literally sacrificed their bodies for spiritual purity. The Catholic Church never officially endorsed these practices, but they never condemned them either. Some radical ascetics became famous for their fecal penances. People would travel to witness these holy men eating waste, seeing it as a miracle of faith that they could do something so revolting and survive. Except many didn't survive, but the deaths were reframed as God calling these pure souls home. The cognitive dissonance required to watch someone die from eating their own excrement and call it holy is staggering. And then there were the plague years, when the Black Death swept through Europe in the 14th century, killing up to 60% of the population in some regions. Physicians became desperate, and desperation led to even more horrifying fecal practices. One theory that gained traction was that the plague was caused by corrupted air and could be fought by introducing stronger smells. So physicians prescribed that plague victims should be surrounded by human feces, not treated with it, topically surrounded by it. Families would collect excrement from healthy people and pile it around the sick person's bed, believing the smell would drive out the plague miasma. Imagine dying of bubonic plague, your body covered in oozing black pustules, fever making you hallucinate, and your final hours are spent in a room literally wallpapered with human waste. The smell alone would be torture. The practice obviously didn't work. It probably made things worse by creating breeding grounds for the rats and fleas that spread the disease, but it persisted throughout multiple plague waves because physicians refused to admit their treatments were useless. There are documented cases of entire families dying in rooms filled with feces, the bodies discovered weeks later by neighbors who couldn't enter due to the smell. Some physicians took it further. They created plague poultices made from the feces of plague victims themselves, theorizing that like cured like that, by applying the waste of plague sufferers to healthy people, they could build immunity. This is darkly ironic because it's conceptually similar to how vaccines work, but executed in the most horrifyingly wrong way possible. They were basically smearing plague bacteria directly onto people's skin. The results were predictable. Previously healthy people would develop plague symptoms within days of the treatment. But rather than recognizing the treatment was causing infection, physicians blamed the patient's weak constitutions. The medical establishment was so invested in humoral theory and fecal treatments that they could not accept evidence that their methods were killing people. This wasn't stupidity. These were educated men who could read Latin and Greek, who studied ancient medical texts. This was a failure of scientific thinking, a refusal to question established authority even when people were dying, and the consequences were catastrophic. Modern historians estimate that medieval medical practices, including but not limited to fecal therapy, may have killed as many people as they saved, maybe more. The practice finally began to decline in the 17th century as the scientific revolution introduced concepts like controlled experimentation and evidence-based medicine. But even then, it didn't disappear overnight. There are medical records from the 1680s describing fecal treatments. Some folk medicine traditions in rural Europe continued using animal dung for various ailments well into the 19th century. And here is the really unsettling part. We still do not know everyone who participated in these practices because many records were deliberately destroyed. Noble families, embarrassed by their ancestors' medical treatments, burned journals and letters that described fecal therapy in detail. Monasteries purged their archives of texts describing the most extreme ascetic practices. So the full extent of how widespread and how horrifying these practices were may never be fully known. What we have are fragments, glimpses into a medical culture that was simultaneously sophisticated, in some ways complex theories about bodily functions, detailed anatomical knowledge, and absolutely barbaric in others. The same physicians who could perform relatively successful amputations would also prescribe eating lion feces for courage. The same culture that produced beautiful illuminated manuscripts also produced detailed recipes for fecal face masks. It's a reminder that intelligence and education don't automatically protect against dangerous ideas, that entire societies can convince themselves that revolting, harmful practices are actually beneficial. And maybe that's the real horror here. Not just that people used to smear themselves with excrement for medical purposes, but that they did it with absolute confidence, backed by the full authority of science and religion, convinced they were doing the right thing even as they poisoned themselves and others. The boy who would grow up to be a physician watched his father die from a fecal treatment gone wrong, then went to university, learned the same theories, and prescribed the exact same treatments to his own patients. The cycle continued for centuries. And perhaps the most disturbing question of all, what practices are we doing right now with absolute confidence and institutional backing that future generations will look back on with the same horror we feel reading about medieval fecal therapy?